Well, Rosemary, would you like to go ahead and get us started? We're right around 30 folks in the meeting. Hello, everyone. Go ahead,
Good
Rosemary.
morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Rob. We come together today at our open table with many of us being sleep deprived after participating in the point in time count yesterday and late into the night. Of course, those people living in the spaces being counted don't sleep very well any night. We meet each week to address this traumatizing reality and to connect with one another and mobilize to end homelessness, to help meet the need we all have for a safe and secure place to sleep and to live our fullest lives. We meet and conduct this point in time count on the traditional homelands of the Puyallup tribe, who've lived on and stewarded these lands since the beginning of time and continue to do so today. We also acknowledge the traumatic history of conquest, genocide, and stolen lands. Today, we're reminded of another genocide as we mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Every year around January 27th, the United Nations honors the memory of the victims of the Holocaust and reaffirms its commitment to oppose anti-Semitism, racism, and other forms of intolerance that can lead to group-targeted violence. The date marks the anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi concentration and extermination camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau by Soviet troops on January 27, 1945. It was officially proclaimed in November of 2005 as International Day of Commemoration in Memory of the Victims of the Holocaust by the United Nations General Assembly. Member states are urged to commemorate the day in whatever form will help people understand the horrific potential of unchecked hate. And today at the United Nations, at the New York headquarters, there's an art display called the Book of Names, set up by the Israel-based Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial and Museum, commemorating each known victim of the genocide. The display contains 4.8 million names of the 6 million dead that Yad Vashem researchers have identified, with many blank pages symbolizing the victims' names that have not yet been recovered. This display reminds me, in looking at it, of the Vietnam Memorial, but of course it's many more names. So it's over 6 feet high and 26 feet long. The names are arranged alphabetically and are printed on heavy white sheets with basic information about the victims, including when they were born, their hometown, and their place of death. Visitors can search the display for relatives and community members that they know. One woman, Brandia Brandman, who was an Auschwitz survivor from Poland, said when she looked at the pages, "When I saw the book, I was overwhelmed because the book reports that they lived and they breathed and they dreamed and they were murdered." According to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, this important exhibition is a call to remembrance, to remember each child, woman, and man who perished in the Holocaust as a human being with a name and a future that was stolen away. It's a call to action, to always be vigilant and never stay silent when human rights and human dignity are under threat. It's not difficult to make connections between a focus on Holocaust remembrance and the current realities of homelessness. The scale and the overwhelming acquiescence of unmarked citizens during the Holocaust is clearly different, but the importance of names and the demand for vigilant, outspoken action in opposing dehumanizing rhetoric and inadequate or damaging public policies are just aspects of the same story. In December, we commemorated the deaths of unsheltered residents of Pierce County in 2022 by coming together to hear a reading of their names and with a temporary installation of 167 paper tents, each bearing one of the names. These names mark real human beings whose lives and potential have been erased by social policy, not a natural condition of resource scarcity, not an erasure chosen by those who have died or who now suffer from exposure and trauma, but a social policy and a social allowance. Our communities contribute to this erasure by the inadequacy of our response. Today, I invite us all to take a moment in silence to remember someone we knew or knew of who died while living homeless. You might also think of someone you know now who is living precariously or on the street, who should not just be counted on a night in January, but whose life should actually count. So let's take a moment to think about someone and honor their memory. Thank you all very much for being here today. And for those of you who are new, we're especially happy to have you, and especially on this day when some folks are pretty bedraggled feeling, I think, from the work that's been being done over the last couple of days. So at this time, for those of you who are new, just to remind you of how we operate in this space, we ask you, if you want to be recognized, to use the raise hand function on the Zoom for that, and Rob can keep track of that and recognize you. Also, if you are, keep yourself muted when you're not speaking, so you don't have distracting background noises. And the same thing with your video, if you're doing other things, to turn your video off at least part of the time. We also encourage you to use the chat for conversation, to put in information that you'd like to share with others, to ask questions that you may not get to ask in time during the time we're together on screen, and to share resources that people might be interested in knowing about. We use this as an ongoing record of what we think about and want to say with each other, and it's available. You can save it yourself, and it's also available on our website. We also ask for people to be respectful in talking and not to speak too many times, because we have a large group and we want to be sure everyone's voices are heard. So with that, I'd like to welcome anybody who's new today to just let us know you're here, and and your name, and then if you're associated with an organization, it's not a time to explain what your group does. You can contact Teresa Power-Drudas about that if you'd like to have an opportunity to share your resources with us in a small spotlight. But for this time, it's just to let us know you're here, and you can also put your information in the chat so we know you're here as well. So just raise your hand and be recognized. Okay, well, either it's fine if this is not the time you want to introduce yourself, but be sure to put your information in the chat so we can know where you're from and how to contact you. And hopefully there'll be a chance for you to speak during the session, and welcome everyone. It's really great to have you here. Rob, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you, Rosemary, for centering us at the beginning of this meeting, as you do every week. Thank you very much. So let's move on to talk about what folks are seeing on the streets this week. As was mentioned by Rosemary in her opening, the point in time count, the annual count that takes place across the county, began yesterday afternoon, and a few of us were involved with the overnight count. So if folks have observations and needs and things that they're aware of that maybe the 50 folks in the room could help with, this would be an opportunity to share, including for folks who are out on the point in time count overnight, who may have some observations and thoughts to share. So I open the floor to others. Yeah, Teresa.
So I was one of the folks who went out on overnight for the first time. I've done the point in time count before, but this was the first time I went out overnight, and it is quite different. I'm glad I had experienced people with me who, and you will find that if you go out on the overnight, you will find that you'll be paired with people who've done it before. It was, I would say the point in time count was pretty well organized, and I was surprised by how many people actually wanted to have conversations in the middle of the night. We stopped at 2 a.m. and it was just touching to see, once we explained what we were doing and why we were doing it, people really gave of their time and wanted to tell their stories. There was one gentleman who had been just swept from I and 21st, South 21st. And I don't know if you know that story. Everyone's hearing stories about it, but the facts are not yet presented to us. At least perhaps someone else has that. But this gentleman talked about the fact that what we heard first was a child was attacked, and so they chose to step up the sweep, which is something they normally don't do when we're doing a point in time count, because it really makes it hard. anyone from the city who's here, it really makes it hard to do a count when people are being scattered continuously. So whether his story is accurate or the story about a child being assaulted is accurate, it sounded like from his perspective, it was a drug deal. The person who was assaulted was in the hospital. The person who did the assaulting was in jail. So give me a good reason to sweep everyone else in that camp for what one person did. Give me one good reason for us doing that. The camp was slotted to be swept and would have been, and people would have had at least some notice to do it. And instead we ended with this. So yeah, let's stop othering. I know I'm speaking to the choir, but this idea that if one person in an encampment does something, everyone ought to be punished is just so grade school. We can do better than that. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Anyone else with observations from the overnight count? I'll share some as well when the opportunity comes up. Well, briefly, what I'll share is I went out with a group from the Multicultural Child and Family Center on the hilltop, and we were in Tide Flats area, which is an area that I am not as familiar with. So we spent the night driving around and talking to folks down in the Tide Flats. I did want to note that the county's outreach folks were aware of 2 sites that they put on the map for us to look at. Both of those sites had been swept in the last week or so by the city of Tacoma. So, so we were kind of fending for ourselves to find people. Thankfully, I was familiar enough from running those odd streets in the Tide Flats to find quite a few people. But that's an area where there's a lot of people living in cars and RVs, where they can find a spot to try to find some out of the way spaces. And it's rough out there. I did want to acknowledge, and I see Council Member Denson, we'll get to you in just a moment, that there were a number of county council members who participated in the overnight sweep. And I wanted to say I appreciate that. And also, or overnight sweep, overnight count, sweeps are on my mind. And also the county executive participated along with Heather Moss, the director of Pierce County Human Services. So, and all the Pierce County Human Services staff. So it's always a very humbling experience to participate in the point in time count. And it was again last night, and it doesn't sit that well with me that I get to come home and sleep in a bed while folks are still out there cold. But people were very thankful to get the things that we could give them. And I wanted to acknowledge Jan Rumbeck and the donation she was able to get from Nourish Food Bank to get some sleeping bags out ahead of the cold weather that's coming. So enough from me. Councilmember Denson.
Yes, thank you, Rob. And I'm sorry I don't have my video on because I'm driving as usual. So I did some counting over at the Puyallup Safe Parking spot. And I just wanted to mention a couple of the guys that I was able to talk to. It just really emphasized to me how important these safe parking locations are and the need for more of these. These guys were so nice, and they told their stories of how they, for example, one of the guys had been on some private land for a while, and eventually the police had come by and said, and the private landowner was okay with them being there, but the police were like, this is, not zoned for this. You can't stay here. The guy just wanted to do the right thing. He had nowhere to go. He ended up parking his car at Fred Meyer for a while, but he's like, I couldn't sleep because I knew I wasn't supposed to be there either. And you never knew who was knocking on your window. Well, he finally got referred to the Puyallup Safe Parking area, and just so grateful. And I heard those stories time and time again from these guys that they're trying to do the right thing. They're not troublemakers. They are just looking for a spot and some resources. to make the next step, and those resources are being provided at that safe parking spot. And so really emphasized to me the need for more of those throughout the county for people that are just looking for a place like we've talked about with the sweeps. These folks are just looking for a safe place to be with either their tent or their car. So I'm definitely committed to working to find more of these locations so that people feel safe and are able to get what they need.
Thank you, Councilmember Denson. Appreciate your participation as well in the count. Ed, or at least I think that is Ed with the frozen video and hand up.
I don't understand the frozen video, but anyway, I wanted to mention to Councilmember Dennison that currently the city is developing some guidelines for churches to follow when they're developing safe sites. And it's currently in your planning department. It's late by a few weeks. And the person from the coalition that is heading up that is Jeffrey Boyce. And if you could lend your support or a phone call to your planning department saying, get this thing out here, it would help dramatically. So thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Anyone else with updates that they would like to share from the streets? One piece of context that I will add, and I will talk more about this here shortly when Jay shares about cold weather lessons learned. We are looking at another cold spell happening, at least with cold overnight temperatures starting Sunday morning. So there's a planning meeting for that today at 11 a.m. that's being hosted by the folks at the county. But just wanted to make people aware that there is definitely a cold spell coming. Doesn't look like it's going to be cold and snowy, just cold overnight, but temperatures down into the mid to lower 20s, especially on Monday morning. So that was one reason that I was especially grateful to be able to hand out sleeping bags to people who are very vulnerable in that cold weather. Any last comments that folks have from on the streets? You can definitely do that in the chat, and we should move on briefly to mention the need and share sheet. And Jay, I didn't actually even notice if you were on the call yet, but if you can drop that, there you are. Yeah, if you have that link available and could drop that in the chat, that would be helpful. But again, that's just a way for people to say what they need for supporting people in their neighborhoods, and whether you have items that you can share with either outreach teams or neighbors who may be able to get them out to those who are living on the streets. So with that, let's move on to talk. We were going to do a brief community spotlight to talk about next week's coalition social event. So I have Courtney listed on here, but I think it's probably a teamwork maybe between Courtney and Jan to share what the plan is for next week. So I open the floor.
I would say it's strictly a Jan. I was invited to ask the First United Methodist Church if we might have our social there. I did that and promptly handed it off to Jan, which I'll do now. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney.
Yes, after all the hard work of these last 2 days, let's party, okay? The Lived Experience Coalition is one of several nonprofits that are housed in First United Methodist Church. First United Methodist Church is on 6th and Tacoma Avenue. a group of folks with a real serious attitude towards social justice. So we are going to have an open house there. Courtney and the others from Lived Experience will give us a little open house of where they are. We will also see the storage site where if folks have things to share with folks who can do outreach, you don't have to be a paid outreach worker. Any volunteer can go here. So we're going to look at the storage area, the things that are available to share with folks on the street. And it is going to be February 2nd, the first Thursday of February, between 4 and 7 p.m. I'll have vegetarian chili. Teresa's going to bring birthday cake. Come and bring something to share if you want, but just come and have a good time. It'll be posted on our website, and it'll be a good time to see folks together in person.
Thank you, Jan. So, and just so you know, every time that we host one of these socials on the first Thursday of every month, they are listed on the coalition website. I actually need to go confirm that the location has been updated. If it is, that would be the work of Garrett, because I haven't done that yet. So I may need to fix that on the website, but do know that will be posted here after this meeting. So yes, go ahead, Teresa.
Jan, this is a setup question. If someone has a friend or family member who's interested in this work, would they be welcome to come to that event?
Yes, I feel like Gracie in Burns and Allen. Yes, come on, bring everybody and anybody. The more the merrier.
Thanks, Jan, and nice setup, Teresa. All right, so Jay, if you are ready, I thought it would be good to talk about, with the cold weather coming in the next few days. We haven't really been able to set aside time since the Christmas time when we had the last cold to talk about a little bit how that went and what lessons we've learned and what we're hoping to do better in future inclement weather incidences. So I hand it over to you, Jay.
Hi, everyone. So I just want to thank everybody. This year, we actually got quite a bit of response in dealing with cold weather response, and the people in community getting together and actually talking with each other and making plans. And so to get into it, I wanted to cover what we actually see as in weather patterns for December and January, or for November and December, first of all. November, we have this situation where we're having higher temperatures during the day and almost freezing temperatures at night. Really had problems with hypothermia and otherwise. And it was mostly the fact that because we're not hitting those cold enough temperatures during the day, we're not opening up shelters. Some of these days we're getting 45 to 50 degree weather during the day and 28 to 19 degrees at night. We're losing 30 degrees in the middle of the day, and there is no inclement weather emergency being called because it's November and nobody's expecting it. For this next year, hopefully, we can key on these points and start making plans to identify the fact that we're going to have much colder temperatures at night during the day, and we may have to look at opening up those shelters ahead of time and reevaluating the temperature scope that we're coming from. If we're only looking at 36 at the day as our call, but we're seeing 19 at night, then we're going to lose people to hypothermia. We're going to lose fingers, we're going to lose feet, we're going to lose toes. So first and most and primary is evaluating and working on establishing how we respond to temperature protocol and how we evaluate our trigger points for opening up shelters and handing out items. Second of all, we're finding that we're anticipating and expecting to have items for inclement weather during an event, but during an event is too late. We need to get things out before the event. We need to start handing out weather items in October. We need to start making that room for whatever may come. We need to start adding waterproofing to kits in some form or fashion, because that is the enemy of a rainforest. We're there in a place where we get the Pineapple Expresses that California got this year. Should have been here. That is normal for us, not for them. And that is something else that we need to look at. Our weather patterns shifted way south. That rainstorm and all of those things that should have come here did not. In retrospect, we're hitting an El Nino next year. We're out of an El Nina. We are expecting that Pineapple Express to pop back up, and we're going to deal with the flooding that we should have gotten this year in infrastructure that's no longer able to sustain it because of carpentry and building cookie cutter houses and otherwise. So next year, waterproofing is absolutely necessary. We've strengthened our network with our response teams with Pierce County, and we've also strengthened it with DEM. We have better communication than we've had previously, and we're only building on that. We have the inclement weather thread as well as the inclement weather listserv. It works to unite people that can't really get onto that listserv, or it doesn't really apply to them to be on it year round. Please let me know if you need to be added to that. The other things that we're noticing is that window of time that we're getting things out. Once it hits 19 degrees, we can't get the items out to those people because they've already either found shelter or they have created shelter and don't want to leave it, because once they leave it, they're going to leave their things there and lose them. So getting those items to people beforehand, pre-action, pre-planning, and discussing these things in July, August, and starting to get our donation cycles going, because we're expecting DEM and other institutions to hop on it when we need to pre-act, and that's not going to be government agencies that do those things. That's going to be donation runs and requests of our community and working with our partners and planning through our contracts. Another factor for our contracted community support is that we need to work with our contractors and establish an open communication frame and really push for that from our contractees to establish what they can and cannot do, what they're allowed to purchase when, and how. If we do not have that mainframe established before an event, it ties our hands and removes our ability to act. So establishing our partnerships is essential. Is there any questions real quick?
So I do see Betty asked a question about Pierce Transit providing free transportation to warming and cooling centers. What I can say is that that has happened in a number of past inclement weather situations. The communication about that availability has not been as smooth as it can be. So that's one of the areas where we can improve things. In terms of whether, well, we are still gathering information is what I would say, and Jay can add to this, especially with the 11 o'clock meeting happening today, to see what the response is expected to be for the cold weather that's coming in the next few days. I'm not aware yet which warming centers plan to open and whether Pierce Transit is going to be providing free transportation to those warming centers. I would presume if it reaches a threshold that is seen to be critical enough, that will happen again. But I don't have that answer right now. Anybody else with questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Currently with Pierce County, they will move to give free service once they have notified that we are in an active inclement weather event. Now, most of the time, to be completely honest, as a bus rider, I'm going to tell you from previous experience my entire life, if it's a weather event, before they activate, usually the drivers are pretty lax and forgiving in certain areas. There are some downtown areas they are not so much for obvious reasons. That they will give free rides if there are shelters open that they know about. Most times they correlate that shelter open with the free service, but there are also many times that drivers will give day passes so that people can stay warm on the bus. There are many times that bus drivers have just given the pass to let people get where they need to go to the library or otherwise before those inclement weather points.
Thanks, Jay. Anybody else with cold weather questions? One of the things that I will share is I have not put the information up yet because I need to get the latest update, which Jay will share with me from today's meeting. But we will be enabling the cold weather resources page that I update daily during the upcoming cold session. So if you are a provider and you want to send information about shelter availability during the cold weather time, you can send it to my email address and I will update that on the coalition website. And then I would say by the end of the day today, there will be a link for the cold weather page up on the front of the coalition website as well. So if you have information to share that would be pertinent to the cold weather, please let me know. I will drop my email in the chat so that folks can send me those pieces of information.
The other thing that we're noticing is that as we work into doing donations and otherwise and helping people, the 10 block ban has been absolutely detrimental to getting supplies to people this year. Our internal services of Tacoma are having a harder time handing things out, getting communication going. The constant sweeps and the ban has created a wall between service providers and people that are being displaced on a constant basis. And the fear of being in trouble to go access services has become a real concern for us in what we're seeing. Particularly like St. Vincent de Paul and our downtown sisters, because they're within those 10 block radiuses. And that fear just keeps those people that need the most help away. So that's something else that we need to consider and work on eliminating or working around during inclement weather, because it only hurts the community in the long run.
I see your hand up, Dion. What do you have to add?
Yeah, I would just want to speak to that and say we are within the radius of a 10 block ban and people are having a problem. They don't want to leave their personal belongings if they're experiencing homelessness and come get resources from us because they are worried that their personal belongings will not be there when they get back. And I can't address that for them. I can't keep their things safe and not everybody can carry their stuff with them. So that is a huge barrier to people even coming and getting basics from us that will keep them alive during cold weather, which is something that we do a lot of. So it's worth thinking about.
Yeah, thanks, Dion. And beyond thinking about talking to your city officials and city elected officials about as well, so that they are aware of the impacts of what is happening in relation to the 10 block bans. Patricia?
I think there's a critical piece that's being brought up. And I think as like a coalition, if you're like a provider or somebody assisting or a church, is where can people leave? You can't carry everything with you, but there's some very important like documents that are needed to be safe and things that, you know, if a lot of time, like I carry a backpack, where can I leave that to be safe, right? So that you can pursue other things that you need to do to try to get yourself in a different trajectory. So that's just what I'm advocating for, like a safe place for belongings as you work through your day to do something. Thank you. I mean, at least your most important belongings. Thank you.
Thank you,
There was
Patricia.
There was one other thing I wanted to tell you that there are some positives that have come out of this season. We have a much stronger relationship with DEM, and we got hypothermia kits. We have 2 at FOB because we did have a hypothermia event there at a couple of times this year. And hopefully we can start seeing about talking to Caleb in the city and seeing if we can't emulate those packs for like 35th and Pacific for the rest of this season, possibly with what's been happening there. But we are getting stronger communication with Pierce County and DEM and each other. We're building a much better network, and we're learning who we can lean on, who is around us. Like Todd, over where you are, you can lean on New Hope. And we're learning the networking capabilities that we can do if we work together and talk and trust that that person next to us does have us. So our community that we're building during this time has been incredible, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you.
So Todd, I saw your question about what's in a hypothermia kit, and Jan could probably offer a little bit of a description of what's involved there. Yeah, she just dropped it in the chat. All right, so I think to wrap this section of our meeting up, I wanted to encourage folks who have an interest in doing outreach and helping with cold weather response to stay plugged in. There'll be opportunities to, it looks like at least one more opportunity this year to be able to help with cold weather response. And, you know, remember this conversation, because in a few minutes, we're going to have a breakout conversation about what regular people can do to help those who are currently homeless. And some of those great simple things that people can do would be what can be brought up in that conversation during our breakout. So thank you for the overview, Jay, and thank you for all your work. All right. So I would like to invite Gerald from Brotherhood RISE. Would you like to give us an update about what all the good things happening at your site in the Hilltop area and what you expect to be coming soon? We'd really love to hear how things are going with Brotherhood RISE.
Sure. Good morning. I'm going to leave my camera off. I'm having a bandwidth problem this morning. Yeah, so I'll just update on the site for those who live in the community and been watching for the tiny homes to get built across ours from our facility on 21st, between 21st and 23rd up on MLK. Yeah, we're still getting those built. We've had a couple of hiccups, that learning lessons, right? Because we've never built tiny homes before. So we're learning a lot of lessons from this long process of having the right builders. We've worked with Clover Park, their construction, but they take breaks, so that's been a long while. We started off with using some of the folks that we house, and we taught them how to do some construction, but we also moved them on to other jobs. So we lost that portion, but right now this is fully going right now. Clover Park is back, and we've hired a couple of contractors to work with them, so it's going pretty fast right now. I want to thank Caleb and the NCS because they worked with us. They've been very responsive to us and working with us. It's been some headaches on both sides, some hiccups on both sides where the city us, some things that was unknown, such as when you do the permitting processes and all that stuff. So, but we're working through it. We're going to have those up. But meanwhile, it's intended to house 16 folks, 16 individuals, and up to 32. But for the entire time, we've been housing them inside our building. So the program has still been working by us giving up the building. It comes at a cost when you do that. So as some of you may notice, we have not been involved in the any sheltering in inclement weather because we have people inside living. So we want to make sure we keep them safe because, you know, most of the time when we do inclement weather, we'll let people stay overnight or however they're there. But because of that, we've backed away from inclement weather. But they're still being housed. They're still being taken care of. We're still providing them services. As most of you know, we do behavioral health services, job placement services, and other social services that we do with them. We've recently partnered with Workforce Central. So what we've done with them, they come over through their WEX program and different programs. and they've been hiring them through internships for those who want to get into another job field. So working with them has allowed us to help move some of those folks along. I don't have a count for this week, but my latest count from last week, out of the original group we had, from the new 16 that came in, we've housed about 12 people. And I don't have a number yet from Workforce Central of how many of those they've hired through the WEX program, but I'll get that number from them as well. And for the last thing, well, last two things. I know people kind of wonder about, I'm having a little cold here, sorry about the delay. Last two things, I know people kind of look at the camping ban. I kind of want to just let people know we have nothing to do with the camping ban. We're just inside the radius of that camping ban. We don't impact that. We don't make any suggestions. We don't call to the city. We're not even involved in it. Last week, Kenneth posted something last week and I found out there was a camping ban. I was like, wow, there's a camping ban around us. They're doing a sweep. So we don't have anything to do with that, but we try to impact the people around us. That's the reason we've been in this business, and that's what our outreach team does. So a lot of people that we have now in the building are people that's kind of camping around an area, and they're closer to maybe Pacific or Tacoma Avenue and those places, but we do bring those in from there. So we do what we can to keep them from being displaced. And I want to just throw out a couple of shouts and thank yous to Courtney, Teresa, and Jan, because they're always supplying us stuff with what we need for the people we're sheltering, and it's very valuable to them, and they're very thankful for what you're giving over to them and helping out with the blankets, with the food. I was there on a weekend on a Saturday, and Jan sneaked up bringing some food. I did eat some of it, Jan, so forgive me, but I was hungry. But anyway, that's kind of the update. We should be done with those tiny homes pretty soon, but the mission will keep going. And by us bringing them inside, we've decided that even once we get the tiny homes up, the need is there for us still to house them inside, because we're eliminating barriers before we get them to a housing solution. And being able to give them comfort by being inside, and it's kind of giving them comfort of being inside and out of a tent. So we will keep that going on. Getting back to inclement weather after that, we'll figure that out. But that need is much greater to be able to get them through the barriers before we get them in tiny homes. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah. One quick question for you, Gerald, in terms of the inclement weather that we expect will be coming up later this year when things get hot again. I'm just curious, when the shelters that are being built, do they have any accommodation for cooling for folks at all?
They do. We put the incandescent systems in, so they go from cool to heat, whichever one they can switch them on or off.
Oh, perfect. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And Jan, you have your hand up.
Oh, the last week of December 2021, when we were in the throes of COVID, before vaccines came out, and we had enough data to know that COVID was scary. DEM, Department of Emergency Management, asked the coalition to have 3 representatives go to the Emergency Operations Center because of severe cold weather. This was December 26th through December 31st. So there were 3 of us at the EOC. Reports were coming in from both paid agency folks and volunteers about people who were in extreme danger of hypothermia. And we were working fast and furious to get people sheltered in the midst of this incredible, ugly, perfect storm of poverty, meeting pandemic, meeting climate change. So people like Sherry Jensen provided staff for stand-up shelters. And her staff was incredibly savvy in trying to figure out resources. Pierce County Human Resources was great at saying that, funds would be available if the contracted agencies would buy supplies, that those funds would be reimbursed. But that means, a whole different set of problems. That means our paid agencies have to put the money forward first to get the supplies that they need tonight, and maybe have to wait 90 days to get reimbursed. So that opened up a whole new can of worms. But I got to tell you that when Gerald's wife called me with a woman who had a disabled 17-year-old child with her, and she was on the streets, and I was able to get her into Bethlehem Baptist just by knowing through this coalition about Bethlehem Baptist. The woman called me back the next day and cried about saving her life. Well, that is incredibly sad on so many levels, because why should we have to be in this position? I remember coming to the coalition and telling the story, and then I couldn't stop crying. And it's not because Jeanette and I are heroes. It's because it's the circumstance. I felt like we were in a war. And then when people with COVID were being reported by our volunteers, I'll never forget, Garrett Nyland looks at me, he says, call Gerald. The city of Tacoma had 18 people that they needed to get from one shelter to another shelter. And Garrett says, call Gerald. I said, Gerald, for God's sakes, Gerald is already carrying the burden of the world on his shoulders. I called Gerald, I had no other options. And Gerald said, yes, send my way. So we have another really crummy weather coming up this weekend. I can't call Gerald. Who are we going to call?
Thank you, Jan. Yeah, Gerald.
I'm sorry, I just hit mute. I was all over the place.
All right. Thank you, Jan. I appreciate the perspective and the passion and the concern. And it's echoed by a lot of us, and we need to demand better. So thank you for everyone who has been able to step up as much as you possibly can. But I do think the big lesson is just that we need to continue to advocate for folks to do better. So we know what our marching orders are, and it's time for action. So let's shift over to some things that we can do better. And to start our path there, let's do a breakout review from last week's session. I know that Timothy, you sent the breakout review to everyone in email, but do you want to do a quick overview here, and then we can move on?
Happy to do that. Yeah, and as Rob mentioned, I've started sending out my breakout notes pretty much as soon as they're done, which is usually pretty quickly after the call, because I've started including this kind of list of events and links that come up during the meeting in it. So I thought it was better for people to have that earlier than not. So you can generally expect that in coming weeks for that to go out over the listserv. So last week we talked about how we can collaborate better and who was there. I think that this was a topic that really lent itself to network and socializing, and as a result, the notes were a little bit on the sparse side. But there's a list of stuff that is helpful. People really appreciated hearing more about the Tacoma Mutual Aid Collective. Party director Jan Runbeck is apparently up to her old tricks. There is a conversation people have been talking about creating some kind of narrative shifting cultural event. Todd Gunther brought that up several weeks ago. He and I are going to be talking about that, getting together to talk about launching something next week. And if anybody's interested in that, hit me up on chat. There was some stuff, one of the things that often comes up is how important it is to keep our resources available and updated and targeted to immediate needs. So That was talked about, and there was some discussion about targeted training programs, trying to do something about the difficulties people are having in finding enough staffing for shelter. Talk about how important the communication is. Teresa's looking for spotlight scouts. Just wanted to highlight that again, so that we've got, a steady stream of people doing great presentations here at this meeting. And again, what we're doing is great, and let's keep doing more of it. And then there's, the list of events on the end. So that's it.
All right. Thank you, Timothy.
You're welcome.
And just a second here. Okay. So with this in mind, we wanted to hold a breakout conversation this morning to talk about what discrete steps that anyone can take to help those who are living homeless and to help end homelessness. And this was a topic that Richard brought to me during the week. That is maybe it's one of the common questions that you get from folks who don't show up to these meetings, who may have compassion to help those that they see on the street, but they just don't know what to do. Anything you would add, Richard, about what would be helpful in setting up this conversation?
No, but it's one of the most, it's one of the most common questions I get, which is how can I help? And it ranges from supplies of blankets, gloves, hand warmers, somebody dropped off 5 cases of hand warmers yesterday. So it's that kind of help, but it's also the level of, we can all do shared housing. Are we doing shared housing? Convincing your church to host people or be a safe parking site, that kind of level, so a more sophisticated level. And then finally, there's the long game of advocacy, supporting the legislative initiatives of the Housing Alliance or some of the national organizations. So I am curious if people have other observations about how they're telling their friends or colleagues how they can help. And that's what I'm hoping to get a larger list of, so that I can expand my list of recommendations. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up the topic, Richard. So without further yakking about it, I'm going to send us into slightly larger than usual breakout rooms, but we're going to go ahead and spend 15 minutes on this. And again, as a reminder, in your breakout room, if somebody could take notes, the better the notes are, the better that Timothy is able to do a summary for all of us. So with that being said, I'm going to create breakout rooms. We will be back here at 10:09. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully that was a good opportunity for conversation, and I'm guessing, just like always, that 15 minutes flew by and it was not long enough. So it happens every time.
That's correct.
At least this time, we were able to do 15 minutes. So I look forward to seeing what people share, what tips and ideas they share in the chat. So we are shockingly running a little bit behind on our agenda, so I think we should shift over to our regular government updates, and we'll get started with updates from the city of Tacoma.
Thanks, Rob. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I just want to give an update on our inclement weather response and in anticipation of the cold weather, just as a couple of reminders. For shelter, we shelter in kind of 3 primary areas, mostly with Catholic Community Services partnership. They will be opening right now, initially 60 extra weather mats at that Nativity House on 14th Street. Also for youth for young adults, Life Enrichment Group will also provide an additional 20 overflow beds for young adults 18 to 24 at that Beacon Activity Center at 415 South 13th Street. And then additionally, Tacoma Rescue Mission, who has a seasonal inclement weather shelter at Holy Rosary, will add another 20 additional beds once they hit that 50 threshold and those are specifically mats, those are not beds. And what they will do is they will actually get connected at the 425 South Tacoma Way, and then they will be transported over there. So that's how that process goes there. In terms of warming spaces, as always, we partner with Tacoma Public Library. That you can find their operations and information at the link I will drop in through their tacomalibrary.org website. And then also Lighthouse Activity Center on 5016 A Street, and the Beacon Activity Center for young adults 18 to 24 will be open during business hours for people. It's for everybody at Lighthouse, and then for free young adults at Beacon. And that more information will be in that link that I will add from the City of Tacoma's inclement weather response resources page.
Real quick, Caleb, there's a question from Carrie in the chat about whether any of the sites are pet friendly.
You know, Carrie, I am not sure about pet friendly specifically. If I don't know if anybody from CCS or Tacoma Rescue Mission is here. I don't think that either one of those places are.
If I recall, typically, if folks have a service dog or a service animal, that is typically kind of the threshold. And I do recall Luis telling us all in the past that, especially during dangerous cold weather, they can try to be more accommodating with that. So I'll add that. And then Courtney, I see you have your hand up.
I was wondering when the
You cut out, Courtney.
and review will be done.
So Courtney, I think what you're asking is when the review of the camping ban is scheduled to be done.
Yes, sorry, I'm having some tech issues.
No problem.
So as I understand, in terms of that timeline, I don't take point in that. But after the schedule for that resource of all of the postings have been done, it'll be 3 months after that. So I think it'll be sometime in May or June.
That's,
Okay, maybe we can do more follow-up on that.
yeah, that's unfortunate.
Rosemary.
This is more a tech question, but the chat disappeared after the breakout room. And so anybody who posted anything before that, I don't know that it was, I don't know if anybody saved it, but it's it doesn't seem to be there. So if you wanted to contact people or put information about yourself, I think you'll have to put it back in, unless you know something else, Rob.
Yeah, so I think that typically happens when we go into breakout rooms, although that might be a change with Zoom. But the chat, with the exception of any chat that takes place during breakouts, the main chat does get saved at the end of the meeting, and that's what we post on the website. So yeah, that may interfere with each individual's ability to save the entire chat. So that may be something new, I'm not sure. But the overall chat is retained at the end of the meeting, so it will be posted on the website. It's just, it takes a little bit of time for that to happen. All right, let's shift over to, I don't know that we have anybody from Pierce County Human Services here because they're busy with the point in time count. Teresa, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I put a message, I have a question in the chat for Caleb, and I'm wondering if we can hear about, I know the document about safe parking is in the works, and maybe we could hear an update about that. And also any more information about the South 21st and I situation.
Teresa, I did reach out to team. I had not gotten an update on that South 21st and I location yet. For the safe parking list, PDS, Planning and Development, they actually did have legal look at it and sent it back to us. And so we are just finalizing that. So you should see that once it's gone through the director's eyes, passed along to coalition team. I think it'll go directly to Jeffrey, and I think he'll disperse of it. So hopefully you get that in the next couple of days.
Thank you, Caleb, and thanks for the questions, Teresa. So, folks from the Tacoma-Pierce County Health Department, anybody on the call? Jenny's must be tired because I know I saw her last night.
Yeah, hi guys.
And great to actually get to meet you in person
I
finally after all
know.
this time.
There was some degree of people like us looking at each other going, have we met in real life? Have we not met in real life? Like, not really sure. It was very strange, but so good to see you in real life and many others. I don't have any updates. Yeah, I know. Keep getting your boosters. COVID's still a thing. It's out there. We're continuing to work with some of our shelter folks to try and do squeeze a few vaccine clinics in this quarter, because we are in an unknown sort of funding, situation with dollars for COVID. So we're doing things with Bethlehem Baptist and Shiloh. Those things are in the works. And that's all for me today. I'm here as always to answer questions if folks have them, but Isaiah might have more to share, but maybe we'll just be quiet today and listen.
Well,
Anything you would like to add, Isaiah?
Yeah, so I do have some updates. So I know a few weeks back, folks were kind of interested in hearing more about any kind of data that we had from 2022 in terms of cold weather events. So I was able to get some of that. So if you would like to hear it, I can share some of the bigger pieces of that information. So I'm just going to read through it. Yeah, perfect. I'm just going to read through what they gave me instead of trying to condense it because that might be easier for me to read. As you can also tell, I have a cold too. So we'll get through this together. So there were 0 CO poisoning related ED visits among people experiencing homelessness in 2022, as far as they could tell. As always, this data is pretty rough around the edges since it's dependent on the providers determining if someone's homeless or not. But anyway, continuing. So there were 229 ED cold weighted visits for individuals experiencing homelessness in total in 2022. And the majority of them came from the zip code 98405. I believe it looks like 38%. There were 57 ED visits related to burns from tent fires or stoves. Again, majority from 98405. And then of those folks who were going in for ED visits, the demographics were majorly, is that the word? No, majority. Oh my goodness, we got there. Majority were men, and they were in the age range of 18 to 64. And it looks like in that bracket, it's mostly 50s and 60s. They were also able to pull some information in terms of like hypothermia deaths from, I believe it looks like 2009 to 2022. So total, like for all of Pierce County, from the local examiner, there were 55 deaths that were put as hypothermia on the death certificate. I don't know if it says here if they were, oh, it does. Yes, so, okay, yeah, so 55 of them were homeless, excuse me. So 55 deaths who were also experiencing houselessness. And it looks like it did increase in the past 13 years. So the highest number was in 2021 and 2022. With the caveat being that the medical examiner did change in 2018. So this data, again, is pretty rough. There's nothing specifically like super precise about it, but it does give us a general kind of trend of what we're seeing in the past few years. So I'm happy to answer any questions I can. I'm not, again, a huge data person. This is coming from our own data people. So I'm just kind of funneling the information as best I can. But I can share whatever information I do have if anyone has any questions.
One thing that might be good, Isaiah, is if you have a document in front of you that could be shared, or just put into the mailing list, that would be helpful too. Mm-hmm. Just to kind of give us a general sense. Yeah. And one question I would have is there a possibility of kind of pulling this information on an ongoing basis so we can see trends?
Yes, we can do that. So the thing with that is that there is a delay usually, so it can take up to about a week or two for that information to get pulled. So we do work with like a data subcommittee with my team over here at the health department, so we can pull that data rather consistently. It just would take a minute. And I know when these things arise, people want that information pretty quickly, but I can't promise quickness when it comes to that. But I can get that ongoing on a regular basis for folks that are interested. And the thing about, I will have to ask if I can share the actual physical documents with y'all, because our data team can be pretty like hold these things close to the chest. So they gave me permission to share it out verbally, but I'll just double check to make sure that I can share whatever like graphs or data subsets that I can provide to y'all.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, so thank you folks from the health department for being here, and let's move on to other parts of the meeting. One point that I need to make is I will need to leave the meeting in about 4 minutes. I have a state Senate committee meeting that I need to pay attention to at 10:30. So if someone is willing to take over the hosting of the meeting, since we're going to go a little bit past 10:30, I'm happy to hand it off. Just let me know in the chat and I'll push that over. But let me move on to the couple of things that I was going to provide updates on. First of all, advocacy updates. Ironically, we're talking about Senate hearings. So I did want to mention that, and please weigh in here, Sally, if I missed something, that the Tacoma City Council, so their study session this week is a joint study session with the Tacoma Public Library, but they are going to include a follow-up conversation around the state v. Blake decision around drug possession, and what the city's position on that will be in their state legislative agenda. That will come, is at least right now scheduled to come to the full council meeting on Tuesday night at 5 o'clock, and would be available for folks to make public comment on. But right now on their agenda for Tuesday night, they are considering how they will change their legislative agenda to update it related to the Blake decision. So I didn't have an opportunity to listen to the meeting earlier this week. That is online, so it's a good opportunity for folks to catch up if you need to. That is an issue that would be very helpful, so that we can make sure that our council members understand the impacts of the Blake decision and whatever they're going to push for in relation to homelessness and pathways into homelessness. Other things that I would add, I will post a link for the weekly housing advocate meetings that take place for the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. We will have that meeting this afternoon from 2 to 3 on Zoom. So everybody is invited to attend. And it doesn't look like that link works, so I'll fix that. And is there anything you would add, Sally, related to the conversation around Blake?
The city has drafted there's a draft resolution regarding several changes to the city's legislative agenda, including the Blake related stuff, resolution 41134. And I can send that out to put it on the listserv. Copy of the resolution, a copy of the memo that explains it. And then there's multiple pages on the legislative agendas. That's probably too much to send out, but the resolution and the memo might be helpful. Those are both attachments to the city manager's report. So even though they're not on the study session agenda, they're available if you dig deep enough. So I'll send those. And then the only other thing, are you going to talk about the county separately?
I was just going to briefly mention it, that in relation to the Pierce County Comprehensive Plan to End Homelessness, and especially the recommendation around the first goal to set up a unified regional approach to homelessness across the county. As I mentioned previously, the advisory board was going to schedule a special meeting for that. And the advisory board meeting actually is going to take place this coming Monday afternoon. And that will take place between, I'm looking here, I think it's between 3 and 5 on Monday. And yes, that's correct. I will post the link to the comprehensive plan to end homelessness site, and you can find the link directly to the meeting on that page, as well as, of course, all the information about the comprehensive plan itself. If you have the ability to attend the meeting on Monday afternoon from 3 to 5, please do. That meeting will, this is an important recommendation that will go to the full county council in February when the consultant's report goes to the council. And it will be presented at a Human Services Committee meeting first, and then we'll see what happens with it at the full council level after that. But it's a significant decision about where we as a community believe that this kind of coordinating effort should be located. If you have feedback for me, please send me an email and let me know. If you have feedback for the full advisory board, there's a way to present that and links on that page from Pierce County to do that. I would suggest doing that before Monday's meeting. And then again, if you can attend Monday's meeting, there is an opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting. So I will stop yammering on. Actually, Courtney, is there anything that you would add as a member of the advisory board?
Well, I'm going to move to suspend the rules and move public comment forward in the meeting before we vote. So
I would appreciate that as well, and I'll second that.
Thank you.
All right. So I see you have your hand up, Jay. I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand over the reins to, I think, Teresa, but I'm going to drop the rest of the agenda in the chat before I depart. And you've got the reins, Teresa.
I will happily do that. I just want to make sure in terms of the planning for the meeting afterwards, you may get whatever you get, because I'm not sure what's already on your agenda for the next meeting. You're okay with that? It'll all say Rob will fill in this space. Thank you. Okay, so Jay, your hand is up.
2 factors. It would be really good to go and watch what happened during that study session. 1, because of what has been discussed, and 2, because TPU came up right afterwards and discussed a lot of their programs. And I know it doesn't seem like it affects us because it's power and otherwise, but it greatly does, because they were saving people from homelessness through their actions. And this is a very strong point that I don't think people understand. Losing your power also loses your home. There are many times in your lease that once you lose your power, you lose your home. There's only a set amount of time that you can live in an environment without becoming a hazmat issue if you do not have power per the state. Families can lose their children, everything else. So I think it's very vital that you guys, if you can, view that, because they discuss how many people they actually helped. And if you relate that to how many people they saved from homelessness, it is a huge, huge amount. And they are also trying to pioneer a program where if you have one person who pays their bills all the time and everything's going good, then they will add credit to their neighborhood to those who are having problems. And that model of assisting each other through the good deeds of our own actions every day by just doing the right thing may be something that we can all look at in our own departments, in our own areas. So some very pioneering movements with community efforts there that we might want to look at. Thank you.
So thank you, Jay. And you kind of led us into the last part of the meeting. This, as Rob mentioned earlier, this meeting is going to be a little bit shortened. There are some people who are going to be doing the point in time count today. And some of those are at the Homeless Connect, which starts at 11. And just everybody's, yeah, this is not a bad day to have a shorter meeting. So having said that, I don't want to cut anyone off. So if you have something to add, this is the time where you get to tell a story about something that is a positive thing that can help us to keep on that hamster wheel. It's a time where you can bring up something that if there's an event going on you want us to know about, if there's something that you really hope we'll talk about in the future, you want to put that into our brains so that when we go to planning the meeting right after this one, we can bring that in. If you have a suggestion of somebody you'd like to hear from, all of that's good to come in right here. Or just, hey, I wish this meeting had been longer, shorter, wiser, whatever. So go for it. Anyone have a thought? Yeah.
Yes, Nourish Food Banks is a wonderful partner, a silent partner to this coalition. They have currently lots, and by lots I mean hundreds of boxes of hygiene kits. These box will contain 1 thermometer, 1 bottle of Tylenol, gloves, masks, 2 bottles this size of liquid soap, body soap, and hand sanitizer. If any shelter manager or outreach worker wants these boxes to pass out, just let me know.
Great. So Jan, you're putting your contact information in the chat. Anybody else? I heard somebody say Teresa, but I didn't see who it was.
Levada.
Hi, Levada.
Yes, I attended a economic forecast summit yesterday at the convention center in Tacoma. And one of the things that the Port of Tacoma talked about in the future, that they were doing some upgrade and making additions to that port. And that's going to be thousands of jobs. So that could possibly be an avenue that someone online that's looking to put people into employment. And they also talked about having training, setting up training for those positions that are there. And I think Workforce Central was there that talked about that.
Oh, thank you. So there is some good economic news on the horizon.
Yes, very
and some
good.
potential for people who need work.
Yes, contract work and employment.
Cool. Thank you. Anyone else? Interesting tidbits? Ending thoughts? Monique, I'm looking at you.
I got nothing today. Nothing.
You never have nothing.
I have everything and nothing.
Oh, there, Courtney, what about you?
I have a little testimonial. I went to get my car worked on, and I was recommended by a friend to go to this place, but they had a sign in their window that kind of made me uncomfortable. You know, God bless the police or something like that. And but I went in anyways, and so far so good on the car service. But you know, they were this business is located by 2 former previously swept large encampments. And I was talking about working with the Lived Experience Coalition. And so we started getting into this long conversation about homelessness and the fear she's had and the encounters she's had. And she goes, well, you pulled yourself up. And I said, I did not. My community pulled me up. The Lived Experience Coalition pulled me up. And I am only here because I am because we are is the tenet of the Lived Experience Coalition. And I just want to let you know that it's really hard to pull yourself up when you are absolutely alone in this world. And so at the end of that conversation, she said, thank you so much. You've given me a lot to think about. And that is the piecemeal work we do. So I am because we are. Thank you.
Courtney, you are very beloved, and thank you for being an ambassador into the world of all that is out there. So, and thank you for sharing that with us. You got a lot of hearts and things going on in the chat too. So the Homeless Connect is today, and it's at St. Leo's at 11. Please encourage people to go. We're going to stay after here. We're going to take a 5-minute break and come back at 10:40 to plan our next meeting. And anyone is welcome. If you don't think you're going to have much to contribute, come anyway and listen. Maybe next time you will have something to contribute, but you're all welcome to come and help us plan what we're doing next. Meanwhile, I don't know if Rob expected me to end the meeting in 5 minutes, but there it is. Have a fun rest of your
Teresa,
day.
there was something from Dr.
Oh.
Jarvie.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I raised my hand. I wanted to follow up on what Courtney said. She said about a police sign in the window, and I've been reading about the Safe Places police cooperation sign with the little rainbow shield. And I was wondering if anybody had worked with the police department for the safety from hate program with the police, and if anybody has any information about that. I was thinking it might be great to get a sign to put on our offices. So I just wondered if anybody had that cooperation going with the anti-hate crimes police initiative.
Anyone in this room have something?
My name's Laveda. You contact the police section where you are, and they will direct you to the point in order to get the sign. And they also have a car program going on where they park the car in your space to keep people from damaging your property.
Oh, well, I'm not concerned about people damaging my property. I mean that's just happens all the time anyways in the neighborhood. But specifically about the anti the racist and anti-LGBTQ kind of actions that happen a lot in our community, and so there's an initiative for the for the safe place. The sign says this is a safe place that you can come and call the police for help, and you can get I'm not sure what it is. So but Laveda, I will do that. I will contact my community liaison. So thanks a lot.
And thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Jarvie. And if you can bring some information about that to the next week's meeting, that would be great. Just to share during the meeting, maybe either at the beginning or the end of the meeting, to talk about how people can get those signs and what they mean. So I'm sorry, did I miss anything else in the chat or anybody's hand that I didn't see? All right, then we'll call it a wrap. And anyone who's willing to hang out and noodle about next week, I'll see you at, let's make it 10:45.